Hello friends! Today we're going to talk about some techniques that comic book artists and illustrators use to render highly reflective surfaces like chrome bumpers, mirrored sunglasses, or the armor of super characters. And to do it, we're going to look at some classic comics. But let's start with some theory. The basics behind chrome theory is to evoke in your viewer's mind three elements: the sky, the horizon, and the ground. You can imagine that you're at the beach and you're looking at a blue sky fading into the horizon and then a sandy beach fading into the bottom of the picture plane. Two gradients, one from the top of the picture plane to the horizon and another from the horizon to the bottom of the picture plane. We will see that color scheme used over and over again. The only caveat is that we're typically dealing with a highly curved surface, like the barrel of a gun or a missile. And there are usually one or more foreground elements in between the picture plane and the horizon line. So the formula ends up being these elements: a sky, one or more foreground elements leading into the horizon, and then a ground plane, and the color scheme that we can call the beach colors. If you incorporate those pieces, though, you can very easily make something that looks a lot like chrome. All I'm doing here is following the curvature of the shape, but we can already see, for instance, in this drawing, the liquid metal special effect that is common in so many movies. Or imagine the side of a brick building with Manny's Lowriders or Manny's Surf Shop painted in bubble letters or graffiti letters that look like this. And it's all helped out by the color scheme that's very beach themed, that evokes in the viewer's mind the sky, horizon, and foreground ideas. Let's look at these elements in some comics. This is a classic Walt Simonson Fantastic Four from 1990, Fantastic Four 344. I'm going to be returning to it in a later video in discussing epic staging, and you can see it here on the splash page, an example of that. But in this video, let's talk about how Simonson renders, for instance, this missile. Notice our formula in effect. The foreground elements, the sky, leading into the bottom of the picture plane, reflected very simply off of a curved surface. Remember that with comic book art, we're not trying to necessarily create a photographic reproduction. There's no time for that. You have a series of techniques in your toolbox to quickly render the surface and then move on to the next panel. And here, the strokes evoke the speed that this is not only a reflective surface, but it's also one that is in motion on the side of a missile. You have to remember that this is 1990. The Soviet Union was still in existence, and so the main baddie in this comic is a giant Soviet robot who is all chromed out. You can see our formula in effect in these surfaces. Here we have the sky reflecting into foreground elements that lead you to the bottom of the picture plane. And again here, as the surface gets more complex, he has some reflective elements at different stages of the curvature. And then the heavy weight is down here at the bottom because that is where the action down here is. Here on the shoulder bumpers, we see again the sky, some reflective elements, and then as the surface turns, the heavier dots and dabs that indicate that there's further action down here below. These dots and dabs are reflecting these guys down here. Here again on the belt, Simonson turns the belt by using the formula. There are a lot of great examples throughout this book as the Fantastic Four battles it out with this guy. Here you can see that the foreground elements are reflected in dots and dabs that are not horizontal. Gives you more visual variation. Here, as the Thing is duking it out with the guy, we see the simple formula, but then also some more nuanced reflections in motion. We'll be returning to this comic later in a later video, but we really can't talk about chrome and chrome effects in comics without talking about Image Comics in the 90s. This is Savage Dragon #3, and there are a lot of chromed out and highly reflective characters throughout Image Comics. In this case, the Savage Dragon is battling a guy very similar to what we just saw, big chrome bumpers on his shoulders. Here we see the horizon line fading into the foreground using some cross-hatching. Notice that the scene is not blue. There's no blue in this scene. They're outdoors. They're in a park. But Erik Larsen is still using the beach colors because it's more important to evoke chrome than to make sense. Here are some perturbations and other reflective elements in the empty space of the foreground. This is already the next generation. This is 1993. Photoshop coloring is being used. And Larsen is able to do more with the gradients. But even in a scene where the background is purple, he's going to be using the beach colors. In this scene, the color scheme is all red and orange, and I think the chrome is even more effective because it reflects the background. But again, the formula is in effect. We have a sky leading into a horizon line, some foreground elements that take you into the bottom of the picture plane. There's a lot inside these Image Comics, and just like the Simonson Fantastic Four, I'll be returning to this Savage Dragon later when we discuss fight scenes and how to stage fights. But let's wrap up. With all of these chrome effects, what we're expecting to see, and again, not photographically, done as quickly as possible with a small and simple set of repeatable tools, is some element of sky leading to a horizon, some foreground elements done with nuance that reflects in some way what's going on in the scene, leading to the bottom of the picture plane. And that can happen on a curved surface. Sometimes the more levels you have of it, the better and more convincing it is, as we saw with the robot. And if you get eventually to a character like Colossus, the formula still holds true. The horizon line ends up being reflected against the curvature of his muscles. The musculature ends up creating that heavy foreground element, and then you fade it down into the bottom of the shape. And just like with the tubes, there can be levels to it as you have different levels to the musculature. All right, thank you very much for watching. I hope to do more of these videos. Please hit subscribe and check me out at scottgross.works online and on Instagram. And happy drawing!